You're listening to a special edition of We Get Work, recorded live from Workplace Horizons 2025 in New York City, Jackson Lewis's annual labor and employment law conference. Over 500 representatives from 260 companies gathered together to share valuable insights and best practices on workplace law issues impacting their business today. Here's your personal invitation to get the insights from the conference delivered directly to you. We'll see you in 2026. Eric Felsberg, welcome to the Live from Workplace Horizons podcast studio right here at the Hilton Midtown, New York City. It's a pleasure to have you here. Why don't you just share with our listening audience who weren't able to attend the conference a little bit about your practice and what you're doing for our workplace law clients these days?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. So I co-lead the Artificial Intelligence and Automation group at Jackson Lewis. I also co-lead the Technology Industry group. So most of my time right now is being taken up with, working with clients on a lot of AI, and, especially with an emphasis on technology employers.
So here we are, right? The title of your presentation today, and it was a plenary session in our ballroom with client guests. Is the future now, or has it already happened, right? Emerging AI and tech issues. So can you tell us a little bit about what you and our guests covered in the presentation this morning?
Yeah, so we had three guests, all of whom are from an organizational perspective on different levels in terms of their AI journey. And so what we talked about was, kind of why AI is being used. What are some of the use cases in each, different organization? What are some of the pitfalls you have to be aware of? We covered regulatory activity, compliance internally, drafting of policies, and those types of issues.
So it's a lot to cover, right? Even in an hour. What do you think were the most important issues and things that you really needed to share with the audience that might really be grappling with just starting out using AI, or, as you mentioned, not even knowing their employees are using AI?
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement around AI right now, and a lot of employers, kind of want to jump into the AI pool because it sounds fun. They want to be perceived as being on the cutting edge, but a lot of times they don't give a lot of deep thought about how we're going to use AI. What issues are we trying to solve for, and so forth. And so we talked a little bit about how that's something they need to think about ahead of time. And then from there, it was, really just kind of thinking about how do we get this AI thing started? Should we establish some guardrails? Should we have a policy in place? And it's being made increasingly difficult because, under the Biden administration, there was a lot of content on, that the administration put out via the EEOC and otherwise around AI. And there were some guardrails out there that we can at least, emulate, if you will. Now that we have a new presidential administration in place on the federal level, a lot of that AI, regulation is kind of pulled away, and now these employers are really having to comply with a patchwork of state and local AI laws, and that's challenging because each one of them kind of regulates something a little bit different than the other. So, when you're thinking about how we're going to use it, you have to think about in which states, localities you have operations, what should be addressed by your policies, and it makes it difficult and challenging to get initiative off the ground. But those were a lot of the issues we covered during our talk, and I think that's what the audience needed to hear today.
So last year, I know we sat across the table, we talked a little bit about AI. The conversation is already different, right? What were some of the most significant changes, do you think, and potentially even the new presidential administration aside, what were some of the most significant changes, and what do you think we might be talking about next year?
So that last part of the question I raised to the panel, and I told them, I even pushed it out further. I said maybe 5 years or whatever I said, but I prefaced it by saying I understand that's an unfair question, because if you think about kind of what we're dealing with today, had you told me that a year ago, it seemed very far out. And so, one of the things we touched on in our talk is this area that's growing around deep fakes, and where you have, it can impact the workplace, where you have recordings and maybe even videos seemingly depicting a person providing a certain message when in reality that's actually a deep fake. And there have been some cases, which I won't go over here, but we touched on them in the presentation, that's here now. And it's something that employers have to think about. Whereas a year ago, I don't think any employer was thinking that, hey, that message that employee just left me, or this, text that I just received is not real. And it came from, some sort of AI platform. So that's here now. And again, I touched on it in the last question with regard to just this growing area of regulations. We're seeing each one of these states pop up, and there's not many right now, but they're coming, and they're regulating everything a little bit differently. So I think employers are trying to, become comfortable with what their obligations are, but that's a complicated question. Again, I touched on it earlier. Where do we have operations? What are we using it for? And they have to think about all those considerations.
So given how rapidly it's changing, probably more so than any other area of workplace law right now, what can we help employers do in terms of what were some of the key takeaways you provided in essence during your presentation, and what our podcast listeners are, likely to want to hear?
Yeah, people just need to get comfortable with it. And employers can't, I don't think at this point, just sit on the sidelines and say, well, we don't use AI, so don't have to worry about it. And one of the points we made during the presentation is the importance of policies. As new employees come on, this generation is very used to dealing with things like AI. This is not, I would consider, new to them. It's just another technology. And employers have to be prepared for that. And the best way to kind of manage that is through a policy, setting the ground rules for its usage, approved usage of certain tools, and give permission as well as prohibition around how they can use it. And an important part, and perhaps even probably the most important part of the policy, there needs to be an outlet for employees to come forward and say, I would like to use this AI tool, may I, and go through the vetting process, or if they have questions about it. The last thing an employer wants to do is kind of put their head in the sand right now and just, kind of whatever happens, because that's when the problems are going to start. So I think employers have to get comfortable with it. That means they have to socialize it. And the one last point I would say on this is certainly important to have a policy if you're using AI. It's almost more important to have it if you're not using AI, because just because you don't think you're using it doesn't mean that there are not any employees who are actually using it. So you need to control that as much as you can.
So proactivity and policies have been a theme of this conference with your colleagues and thought leaders, and it sounds like you're in the same camp there. So as co-leader of the AI group and technology group, can you share a little bit about how Jackson Lewis is helping employers grapple with something that they really never had to deal with before?
Yeah, so I think it kind of falls into a few buckets. The first one is just educating, demystifying what AI is, what it's not. Helping employers understand the different AI platforms and tools that are available to them. The second piece is educating around the regulatory requirements. We are doing a lot of policy drafting and policy review right now. And, I would say that, every policy needs to be tailored to the organization, right? You shouldn't fall into this, trap, if you will, of, just using kind of a generic AI policy and think that's going to protect you. Because, again, there's a number of considerations, and I mentioned a few of them earlier, that you have to think about when you're doing this. And then the last piece is just, as employers start to get involved with AI providers, speaking with them about contractual terms, for example. What is the developer, for example, providing to you? What are your responsibilities when using that tool? And that can have significant ramifications if later on, something goes sideways.
Eric Felsberg, an incredibly important topic right now. thank you for stopping by and sharing the insights from your presentation. And we look forward to seeing you next year and hear what's happening next.
Yeah, me too. So we'll see. So thank you for having me.
Right. Thank you for listening to Jackson Lewis's podcast, We Get Work. Focused solely on workplace issues, it is our job to help employers develop proactive strategies, strong policies, and business-oriented solutions to cultivate a workforce that is engaged and stable. Please tune into our next program, where we will continue to tell you not only what's legal, but what is effective. We Get Work is available to stream and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. For more information on today's topic, our presenters, and other Jackson Lewis resources, visit jacksonlewis.com. As a reminder, this material is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to constitute legal advice, nor does it create a client-lawyer relationship between Jackson Lewis and any recipient.